So hello to everybody. Hi to the three panelists. Thank you so much for joining, and to Nydia, the co-host. So essentially how this is going to run is I'm going to, first of all, put up some very quick basic slides on the overall basic information on the NERC Independent Research Fellowship so that everyone here understands whether they're eligible and that they are definitely interested in hearing about this fellowship today. And then we're going to hand it over to our three panelists who have been awarded this grant, this fellowship, and they're going to talk about their experiences for a little while, and then we're going to open it up to the questions. If you have questions as we go, please feel free to put them into the Q&A. You can also put them in the chat, but it's easier for us to find them if they're in the Q&A box down below. So you can keep all your questions as and when you think about them, just pop them in there and we'll read them out at the end. So I'm going to share my screen now and we can get started. Make myself small so I'm not covering my entire screen. There we go. Okay, so today we are talking about the National Environment Research Council NERC Independent Fellowship. And this is hosted by the Paleontological Association. So you're all very welcome here today. For those who don't know who we are, we're an association, a charitable organization that's based in the UK. And we're putting on a series of webinars for free for anybody to join to learn more about sort of different types of postdoc funding that's available. So today with the NERC Independent Research Fellowship, this is an independent research fellowship, the IRF, which invests in researchers seeking to conduct their own environmental research within an eligible host organization. So you'll probably hear more about the eligibility of the host organizations later on today. You should demonstrate convincing evidence of working towards this goal of a high potential to become an independent leader for the future. You must demonstrate within your IRF that you're awarded that you can work independently of senior colleagues with whom you might have already previously worked with or collaborated in the past, and sort of currently work with in a supporting role. There are no funding limits of the IRFs, and they will support and fund 80% of full economic cost. Again, if we have questions about that, maybe we can put it into the Q&A. And as well as that, the IRF, it will fund facilities and cruise costs. So for, scientific cruises, for example, but it won't fund PhD studentships. So again, with their eligibility, they are very strict on what they allow and what they don't allow in these fellowships. So you must be an early career researcher, hold a PhD qualification, or expect to submit your thesis before the fellowship interview, be based in a UK research organisation, eligible for NERC funding, and there is no limit in the number of years of postdoctoral or work experience. You should not apply if you hold or have held one of these positions. So I highlighted this because it's quite important if you've had fellowships in the past and you're considering applying to NERC in the future for the Independent Research Fellowship, which is you cannot hold a position of lecturer level that includes setting up a group or conducting your own research, an equivalent competitive fellowship, or a tenured academic post. There is still rules that apply still at the moment to COVID-19 interruptions, which was a pleasant surprise to see on their website. So this one is based from last year, but I'm going to assume that it's probably crossed over to this year as well, which is that if you've had some major interruptions to your work over the last number of years due to the COVID-19 pandemic, there is considerations that can be made, and there is an area, I think, in your application in which you can say whether or not that was impacted you and for how long in your research capabilities. Last year and the year before, so 2022, 2023, 28% were awarded funding from NERC. If you're looking for more sort of detailed information, as always, all of this information is practically taken directly from that website there, UKR.org, and go to NERC applications or something like that, and you'll find them straight away. And here you can also find, which is very useful, a list of people that have been awarded this fellowship in the past, and you can search that system through a specific term like paleontology, for example, to find others who have also been awarded the fellowship with a paleontological application. So the fellowships themselves, they last 5 years and you can choose to work full-time or part-time. There is one funding opportunity per year. As far as I could find, currently the opening date for this year hasn't opened yet. So here I've just left last year's dates, which is just around the corner from this year. So maybe that's why we haven't heard yet, which is the 16th of August was when they opened it last year. 8th of November was the closing date. And then going through those stages in the earlier part of the following year. So I'm going to assume that it's probably going to be something similar to that again this year. So you still have plenty of time to consider whether or not you want to avail of this fellowship. So for today's panelists, we have 3 amazing panelists. So thank you all again for joining. We have Dr. Sarika Wagley at the University of Exeter. We have Dr. Thomas Guillerme, I might have said that wrong, I'm so sorry, University of Sheffield, and Dr. Luke Parry at the University of Oxford, who are joining us today to share their experiences of the application process and their stories behind maybe why they applied. So thank you all 3 of you again for being here. I don't really mind who goes first in terms of showing your presentation. You can either, if you haven't got one already sort of made, you can just talk through your experiences, or of course, we're happy to always share presentation slides. So that might be easier. So generally, we could ask you to stay under 10 minutes or so. That would be great. Anything 5 to 10 minutes would be wonderful. So is there anyone who particularly wants to go first to give an overview?
I don't mind going first, Laura.
Excellent. Sarika, take it away.
Can you see my slides? And can you see them presenter mode?
Your mode.
How about that now?
Perfect. There you go.
Okay, super. So yeah, my name is Sarika Wagley. I'm a microbiologist at the University of Exeter, and I was awarded my NERC IRF in 2023. I started it in November 2023, and this is my front slide from my interview that I had in March 2023. And I just wanted to kind of 2 tips if I could pass them on to the future candidates. So the first one for me is to try and see if you can have a catchy or memorable title for your IRF proposal. So mine was Tracking Hidden Dormant Bacteria in the Environment, but I sort of front-loaded it with now you see them, now you don't. And I kind of wanted to have something catchy so that it would stay in the reviewer's memory for a bit longer. And if you need inspiration for titles, you can look through the past awardees and see what kind of titles they had. They're not always catchy, so I don't know if you think this is catchy. I went with it. And the other thing that I would suggest is if you get to the interview stage, to have a really good picture on your front slide. There's always a few seconds or a minute where you're sharing the screen, checking if it's in presenter mode, maybe the panel members are.
Sarika, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but we're struggling slightly to hear you.
Let's see if this helps. Is that any better?
Oh yeah, that's a lot better. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. I'm so sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay. It's fine. So the second tip that I was going to say is if you get to the interview stage, to try and have a really good picture on your front slide. There's always a few minutes or a few seconds that you're loading your talk up. You might be swapping from presenter mode. The panel member might be saying talks. And so if you've got a good picture, the other panel members can kind of sit there and just kind of look at that and take it in. And that also might stay in their memory longer. So just trying to make sure that the panel or the reviews remember you because they've got lots of applications, lots of interviews. Or you can just go with the normal kind of style of talk. So I have got a NERC IRF for 5 years, which is a real privilege for me. And it means that I get to carry research on my own topic and lead the research in the direction that I want. It also is a really good way of starting up your own group, and it puts you in a really strong position for academic positions or lectureship positions later. So if you're thinking about applying for NERC IRF, I would say that there are 3 areas that we need to show excellence in, and they need to be emphasized throughout your application process. So the first one would be the project. So it needs to be an outstanding project. You need to show excellence as you as a candidate, and you need to show why your host institute is a good place to do this work. So on the next few slides, I'm just going to show demonstrate throughout my application how I covered these 3 areas. And you need to think about not just your case of support, but even showing the lay and technical statements, how these 3 aspects are really amazing. Think why the funder should give 500,000 or £1 million for your research project. So my NERC IRF project is about bacteria called Vibrio species, and you find them in the marine estuarine environment, and they cause seasonal infections, both in females and in shellfishes. So one of the things that I was saying is that I was one of the few experts in the UK who knows about the species, and I emphasised that through my track record. So the research that I had carried out was looking at how these Vibrio bacteria enter a state of dormancy. So when they're healthy, just put my pointer on. So when they're healthy, Vibrio bacteria, which usually is when they're in the most optimum conditions, favourable conditions, they're rod-shaped bacteria. You can grow them in the lab and identify them, and that's when they can cause disease in both humans and in aquaculture. But if you take those healthy bacteria and you put them into non-favourable conditions, which might be cold temperature for winter months, these bacteria switch into a dormant state. And so they go from rod-shaped to this lovely round structure, cocoon structure, we call them, and they're much harder to detect. Low metabolic activity, so they're not even respiring a small bit. And we can't detect them in our labs. The normal culture methods don't work on them. So one of the things that I was emphasizing that I am able to collect these dormant cells, both in the lab and in the environment, and switch them into this actively healthy growing population. And by controlling that sort of switch, I can now study how they come out of dormancy and how they come out of dormancy. This would be key to reducing the global disease burden of infections that are arising around the world because of climate change. So my research was found by 2 publications, so 2 recent publications, I would say. So on the left, I had a really good paper that showed I could isolate these dormant bacteria from the environment and in the lab and switch them back into an actively growing population. And I had certain tools that I could use to analyze them. And then on the right, I had another recent paper that was showing that I'm an expert in looking at the real species in the environment, that I can collect samples and identify the species. So these 2 papers really underpinned my NERC IRF. So I won't talk about any of the objectives for that. I don't think that this was kind of really important to show that I had a good track record in the research that I was going to carry out. So then there's me as a candidate. So I carried out my undergraduate degree at the site, and then I did my PhD in the civil service at the CFAS labs in Weymouth, and my PhD was on Vibrio species in shellfisheries in the UK and in Europe. And when I finished my PhD, I changed track. So I was no longer doing microbial ecology anymore. I was moving to really hardcore molecular biology, and I was working on different pathogens to look at how they cause disease in the human body. So I switched quite a lot, but I was learning new tools data in my fellowship application. So during this period, I did have a good like a side project going on, and in 2016, I was able to win some BBSRC funding and some industrial partnership funding. And this meant I could work on doctoral advances for a bit longer. And then I finished that project as we came out of the pandemic. And I didn't have any more money to do any research redundancy. And so I took up a teaching in the Centre for Medical Biology, and during that time, I was applying for more fellowships. So the other things that I made clear in my application is that I was fluent in 2 level voice, 3, and not voice. And also what I stressed was that I have a real passion for outreach work. I'm one of the organisers of science and also a STEM ambassador, and I think I'm really involved interview screen and make sure that the children get this is a really good area. And also we do lots of EDI work. I'm on the biosciences at EDI committee, and I'm on the main. So then finally it was about the host institute. So if you picked up there, you would have seen that actually I stayed at university after my PhD, after first postdoc. And so I needed to convince the viewers of the panel that actually staying at University of Exeter was the right place. And so the way I did that was to say that actually at the University of Exeter, I've got everything I need. We have a climate systems institute here called Global Systems Institute. And so my project is a lot about changes in the climate and sea surface temperatures. So I knew I would be tapping into those skills there. We have an excellent sequencing service and state of the art, which I'm using in my fellowship as the objective. And I sort of spoke about the works that were going to help me in my IRF in my research. So I tried to make this as strong as possible. And then I just wanted to share that the final slide is I applied for quite a lot of fellowships. So in 2015, I started applying for fellowships, and I started with a Royal Society Fellowship, and that got rejected. And so I turned that into this BBSRC industrial partnership area with some funding from industry. And then while I was carrying that out, I tried several times to apply for fellowships, including the NERC research. I really used to have some papers that underpinned my research. So those 2 papers that I showed you in the first few slides were because actually they were saying that we needed those publications at that. And then in 2021, I applied for a BBSRC discovery grant, and I got to the interview stage. I didn't make it, and it was quite painful actually, and really painful rejection. Then I kind of had to pick myself up and try again to apply for the NERC Independent Research Fellowship in 2022, and I had to switch my application from BBSRC facing to environmental, and that's what I did, and I'm happy that was successful. So here I am. So yeah, happy to take any questions.
Marika, thank you so much. It's such a journey you've been on to get here. It's really, really interesting. And also your work is fascinating, I think, hands down for, I'd say, all of us here. It's so interesting. So I really appreciate that.
I forgot to mention.
Yeah.
So because I had been a postdoc for 12 years, I'd say, with 2 maternity breaks, and I was working part-time. So I think I've been able to get a more qualified CV. And if you're a junior early career researcher, so say you're just 3 years after your Viva date, the panel will take that into account. They don't expect you to have as much. But if you're a senior like I was, I think they expect you to have more. And so take that into account when you.
Absolutely. That's a really good point as well, is that if you have those different kind of gaps and transitions in your career as well, it's important to make sure that you highlight those things as yourself as a candidate, that it makes you stronger in other aspects because you have that experience, but that your career trajectory is not exactly the most obvious maybe on paper to other people. So it's important to get the balance to make sure that they can see that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we'll definitely come back to that again, and I'll ask you more questions about that in the Q&A. Thank you so much. Luke, you're staring at me, so I'll get you to go next. Your brightly colored top.
Yeah.
Would you mind sharing your slides, and we'll see how.
No, absolutely. I'm hoping that my my feeble internet connection is up for this, but let's find out.
Sure. If not, you can like not share them and then maybe just talk off the slides or something like that. It's totally fine.
I've got an interpretive dance prepared, so I'll just do that instead.
Oh, perfect. That's even better.
Right. Okay. Let's see. I hit the button. Let's see if it's going to work.
Yep, we can see your normal screen mode.
Normal screen mode.
Okay, there we go. I think it's working. Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. So obviously I'm here to talk about NERC IRFs because I was awarded a NERC IRF in 2022, and then I took that up in 2023 in January. But sort of actually following on nicely from the previous talk, my journey to getting a NERC IRF involved applying for lots of fellowships. So I got my my PhD in 2017 from the University of Bristol. In 2018, I applied for a UKRI Future Leaders Fellowship, which I didn't get. In 2019, I applied for an 1851 that I didn't get. And then in 2020, I decided to take a different approach and apply for many fellowships, and more or less everything that I was eligible for at the time that was sort of like a senior level fellowship. So that was the Royal Society, the URF, the NERC IRF, an ARC-DECRA fellowship in Australia, and a CNRS job in France. And I didn't get any of them, and I applied with the same project. So I was just tailoring the same project to the slightly different specifications of each of these different funding streams, but it was the same fundamental piece of research. And then in 2021, I did the same thing, but after getting loads of feedback from a ton of different people, including different reviewer comments from the previous round of these applications, I applied for the same set of fellowships again, and I was interviewed for the URF, but didn't get it, but then got the other three. And so this process of taking a research idea and then getting a whole load of different feedback on it was really essential to sort of turning it into something that different funding bodies would actually like the sound of. So it was an awful lot of work. Like, all of these different funding bodies have very tight restrictions on what their budget are, even things like the size of their margins and what their font size should be. So actually doing this was an awful lot of work, sort of, juggling all of these things in my brain simultaneously. But it paid off because it meant that I had a research idea which started off being okay, but I was able to turn it into something really good. By getting a lot of different feedback. And then ultimately, I think I've got some more animations. I took this fellowship up at UCL at the start of 2023, and then I was offered basically my dream job. And that's one of the great things about the NERC IRF. If you get it at one institution in the UK, it is portable, and you can transfer it to a different institution in the UK. So I think what I would start off by saying is that applying for these sorts of fellowship opportunities as soon as you're eligible is really essential, because it means that you can capitalize on that sort of feedback, but it also means that you can develop these ideas over time and turn it into something, turn them into something that's fundable. And then, so each time you write and submit one, even if you don't get it, because it is painful getting those rejections for those fellowship applications, you do gain valuable experience, especially if you make it to the interview stage, because those interviews are really informative about, what might work about your proposal and what maybe needs a little bit of work. I would also say that you should seek mentorship from a broad set of senior colleagues. If you've got former supervisors or collaborators that would be happy to read through these things, then send them to them as soon as possible. And success rates for pretty much all of these schemes are pretty low. So in my experience, would suggest at least that tailoring the same sort of idea to multiple different applications can pay off in terms of improving your chances at securing one of these fellowships. So Ola already covered some of this stuff, so I'm not going to labor over this, but a NERC IRF is, so it's 5 years, so it's a substantial portion of time, and it's for early career researchers to focus on a research question that's independent of people that you've worked with before, and it has to be at an eligible institution. And probably the most obvious of these would be universities, but actually the Natural History Museum and other museums will host these fellowships. The museum in Oxford will also host them. So think, particularly as paleontologists, we should think broadly about where our research might best sit in terms of where to take up these fellowships. And proposals that you submit need to fall at least 50% within the remit of NERC, which I don't have that pinned down exactly what that is, but that's something you can definitely check on the NERC website if your research falls into that remit. So Ola's already touched on this, so I'm not going to go into this either. So you can't get one of these if you've already had a lecturer level position or held an equivalent fellowship from a different funding body. So one thing to be really mindful of, though, is that you can't just send this application off to NERC saying, I want to do this fellowship at this place. You require institutional support to actually get one of these fellowships. And I would get in touch with potential host institutions early, because the head of department will probably need to write you a recommendation letter. And you also need to make sure that the necessary facilities to do your research are present there as well. And so perhaps more importantly than that, some institutions will support all of the interested candidates that they get for fellowships, but others will have some sort of pre-application sifting process. So it's important to consider, because you might be thinking, oh, the deadline for this NERC IRF is in October, and so I don't need to think about this until the late summer. But it may actually be that the institution that you might want to do this fellowship at had an internal deadline that was many, many months in advance of that. So it's important to think about these things as early as possible. So I'm going to briefly talk about what the actual process is for putting together one of these fellowships. I'm not going to talk in great detail about what my research is, but I'm going to talk about it sort of in terms of how you go from designing the project to actually getting the interview and potentially getting offered the fellowship. So it opens, as Ola said, in sort of the late summer and then closes in the autumn. And it took me probably about 2 months to write the application, and that included sort of talking about the budget and things like that with the finance people at the university side. And then the interviews were held in March, and then I heard back about the middle of May. So like I said before, be mindful of these other internal deadlines, and also how you format your application. So probably your host institution will also be on top of this, but I think it has to be 11-point aerial and nothing else. So be mindful of these sorts of really restrictive formatting concerns. Okay, I think my slides are frozen. Have you lost me?
No, you're still here. It's on. Oh, there we go. It's moved now. The slides are there.
My computer is having some trouble.
Oh, we're going through all your slides now.
Through all of my slides.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
There we go.
It's skipping ahead.
Oh, I think I'm back at the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. IRF eligibility, done that. Done that. Okay. Yeah. So the application is.
There you go.
I think that's good. The application is split into these 3 large chunks. So that's your background. So talking about your background as a researcher, the project, and then the justification of resources, where you talk about what facilities and equipment you'll need, and then you'll need to carefully justify why you need these things and how much they cost as well. So one thing in particular to be mindful of is that they'll only fund pieces of equipment up to £10,000. So you might need to source alternative sources of funding if you have a big piece of equipment that you need to buy in order to do your research that your university doesn't already have. And then also these sorts of applications in the distant past used to have an explicit impact section where you talk about how your research impacts society at large or the scientific community. And that's gone now, so that needs to be tied up into the project part of your application. You might also have external project partners who are providing particular things. So that might be research expertise or materials or any of these sorts of things, or access to particular really specialized pieces of equipment. So I would contact them as early as possible, because you will need recommendation letters from them. And it's good to have that not have to happen, 48 hours before the actual application deadline. So one other really crucial thing about NERC in particular, probably more than any of the other fellowships that I applied for, is that they're quite risk averse, and they like to know that you thought about potential things that could go wrong for your project, and that's definitely something that you get asked about in the interview. And one thing that was different between the first time I applied for the NERC IRF and the second time I applied for it is each of the individual work packages and chunks that I had in the actual project, I collected some preliminary data for and did some preliminary analyses to demonstrate that the sorts of things that I want to do are possible, and the data can be made, and the data is available to do them. So if you have preliminary data, definitely show it. And if you don't, think about getting that sort of thing together for your application. And finally, on the project, remember to think big. It's got to be a really substantial piece of work that'll take roughly 5 years to complete. So when I was applying for these things, I'd done my PhD, which was sort of like a big piece of work that's that other people had a hand in designing in the background. And then I'd done sort of short 1 or 2 year postdocs where it was a really short, very, very particular project. And this is a real opportunity to do something much more big picture than that. So rather than a project that might take you 2 years that you might be used to doing as a postdoc, it's something that's going to take 5 years to complete. So it might have to have more working, sort of more moving parts than applications you put in previously. So the IRF, what will it actually fund? So it'll fund things like your salary, travel, equipment, and your research expenses. It won't fund PhD studentships, but you can definitely talk about potential PhD projects that could be spun out of your NERC IRF if your host institution has a NERC DTP, so a NERC doctoral training program. And then, as I said previously, all of your research expenses for pieces of equipment are capped at £10,000. So if you do need to find these, you might have to search for match funding, and that might vary depending on what different institution you're at, if there's funding available for these sorts of equipment items. Definitely make use of any support that you get from the finance people at your host institution, because there will be some budgetary constraints, and these will directly feed back into what you can and can't do in terms of your research proposal. So think about these things pretty early, and you need to directly justify all of the costs associated with your project. And ideally, you should have quotes for big bits of equipment as well. So I had to get some quotes for microscopes and for software licenses as well. And again, try and get these things early on. So finally, the interview. If you do make it to the interview stage, one thing that I would say is that the panel will have read your application, because they'll have been involved in the shortlisting process for the interview. So don't focus on you'll be asked to give like a 5 to 10 minute talk, and don't focus on the minutiae of your research as much as you focus on the big picture. So, focus on the sorts of questions that you'll be able to address, and where that research might lead you in the future, and what you can do with an IRF that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So think big when you're giving your talk, and not just about the nitty-gritty of technical aspects of the project. The interview, there are sort of roughly predictable sorts of questions that you might get asked, like, why to risk? Like, if you can't do this part of the project, what would you do instead? And definitely preempt these sorts of questions, because they're the sorts of things that will come up in the IRF interview, but also in interviews that you might do for faculty jobs or for other fellowships as well. You'll definitely be asked career-based questions about what your greatest achievement is, what you might go on to do, what the IRF will allow you to do that you wouldn't do otherwise. But also, crucially, you'll also be asked things about academic citizenship. So how you've been a good citizen and been a positive influence in the field in general. And this might be related, and this might be tied to things that you've done for public engagement, EDI initiatives, perhaps potentially sustainability, particularly with NERC's remit. And as paleontologists, I think we're often quite well suited to address these questions, because we have a lot of opportunities to do things like public engagement and widen participation in our field. So I think I'm getting pretty close to the end. So yeah, definitely preempt things like what the biggest weakness is, links between your research and other parts of like the NERC big picture strategy, and how you've been a positive influence in the field in general. So general advice, be proactive about seeking support from your host institution. Start applying early and apply for many different things, because you know these fellowships are a lot of work, but it's less work to tailor them to different funding bodies. And also think big, because you have 5 years of funding if you get one of these. So it's a potential to do some really big piece of research. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen there because my computer sounds incredibly unhappy.
Thank you so much, Luke. Really appreciate it. And it was really nice to go through that from this perspective of sort of every single stage, right, that you've been through, and kind of getting really good feedback of, you know, the reality is you need to start early. You need to reach out to people and get as much feedback. And again, also thank you for sharing the kind of storyline for you to get to this point as well. I think it's very important that people see the amount of rejections that everybody has to face before you're able to get one of these larger fellowships. So again, we'll definitely come back to, I can see there's some questions already in the Q&A. In the meantime, we're going to jump straight to Thomas now. And Thomas, if you want to take it away and share your screen, please do.
Woohoo! Thank you. Let's see. Up. I cannot see which screen it's sharing. Up. What's this doing? Nothing. Oh, here we go. Yay!
Perfect.
Cool. Awesome. Oh, I just need to move things around.
Great, thank you.
Oops, cool. Thanks a lot. So I think a lot of things I'm gonna say are very similar to what Sarika and Luke have said, which is good because we independently have the same kind of things. And so I was thinking of like pro tips specific to NERC. Spoiler alert, this is an ad. I don't have any of this easy ways tips. But yeah, I'm just going to show kind of what I thought through the process. So I go here. So yeah, that's me. So I kind of work, just a bit of background. I work on looking at diversity of traits through time. And so that's a lot of working with trait spaces, for example, or morphospaces. And I do also a lot of phylogenies and macroevolutionary and macroecological research. And basically by most, what I'm happy to do most of the time is just develop R packages and things like that, which I always found a very hard thing to sell for a grant, because they don't want you to just like do some little stat solution. They want you to think big, as Luke said. So about my background, so I'm from France, but doesn't matter. So I finished my PhD in 2015. I worked with Natalie Cooper. Then I did one postdoc in the UK with Martin Brazeau, then another postdoc in Brisbane with Vera Weisbecker, and then a third postdoc in Sheffield with Gavin Thomas. And that's when basically Gavin really helped me to apply for the NERC Fellowship, which I got, which was really nice. And in Sheffield, it would also translate to a permanent position. I'm going to talk more about that later, which is a good thing. But also to show kind of my journey through grant applications. There's going to be a lot of failures. I did one Marie Curie, then one Endeavour. That's like a kind of early career, very like just post PhD kind of thing in Australia. Also failure. A Royal Commission, failure. Marie Curie, failure. A DECRA, failure. Royal Society that I applied also same time as the NERC, failure. And the NERC success. So I have 1 out of 7, which is not great, but looking at also the data from Luke and Sarika, it's pretty similar. So basically, I want to go quickly through what I've learned through basically nearly 10 years of applying for grants. First thing, it's very clear is failure is the norm. It's hard, but that's just how it goes. Then one thing I kind of learned without people having told me is that I find that success is not directly linked to experience and skill. So there's a big part of randomness, unfortunately. That doesn't help reinsuring people. Maybe it does, I don't know. But for an example, I had the same project for this Marie Curie that I submitted 2 years apart. So in 2018, my CV was much bigger than, as in much better, I guess, than in 2016. Both failed. I got actually a higher score in 2016 than in 2018. So my score decreased for some reason. Another great one example that I've been saying, so this is even more controlled experiment for the Royal Society grant and the NERC grant. Same project written in exactly the same way with the same CV, same host institution, etc. For the Royal Society, I didn't even got to interview, so I got a straight reject. And for the NERC, I felt like I was accepted very easily. Like even at the interview stage, it lasted barely 10 minutes and people were already, I think, agreed to give me the grant. So that was good, but it shows the randomness of maybe linked to the panels, etc., etc. That's not really a tip, but it's more an observation. And then what also the colleagues said is it takes a lot of time. So I've been doing 9 years of paid research after my PhD, and basically I just roughly calculated that between 1 and 1.5 years was used just for grant writing. I take 2 or 3 months for applying for a grant. So that's a lot of like institutional money wasted. It's a lot of time I find wasted, but there's a positive coming after that, don't worry. And another thing that I want to mention that I think is a good general tip, it's a very strong hit to morale in this grant. I'm rarely convinced I'm an awesome researcher or whatever, but when writing the grant, I have to convince myself I am, to a point where I start generally being convinced that I am the best ever, and then I get rejected, and that's really hard, whereas at the start, I didn't thought I was the best ever, and it was easier. Anyway, so that's a hard one to think about. And then for NERC specific tips, so Luke has been mentioning that as well, is start working on it early. I would say so 2 or 3 months is like full on working on the writing the grant. But I would suggest even like starting a year early is very good. So you can get preliminary analysis, you can have lots of discussion with colleagues of what is exciting, where the project can lead to, etc., etc. I think like it's probably worth spending more time early on than the 2 or 3 months rush writing. Good thing for the NERC I found compared to other grants is you have quite a lot of space for writing. So it's 10 pages for the project, which gives you plenty of space to like describe your ideas in details, why they're exciting, etc. And then 17 pages of other stuff that's I find in mainly, kind of yada yada on like why this institution is good or justifications on funding, etc., etc. That takes a lot of time. And a general advice I got, and that at least worked once, was to spend a lot of time on the introduction and in general on each first sentence of each paragraph. So that's been taught to me of a way to be very snappy and easy to read. And I literally rewrote my introductory paragraph probably 10 times, every time, maybe not every time from scratch, but just churning through it until it's kind of very snappy and to the point. And yeah, that's another point that I wanted to come back to is check when you apply, because you have to link your project to an institution, although once you have the grant, you can move it around. Check also what institution can offer for you. So here in Sheffield, for example, they offered me 1 PhD student and the funding for 1 PhD student and a permanent position, which when you write the grant is a very good argument to say, yes, fund me. There's a lot of extra benefits by giving me the funding, because then I'd be leading yada yada kind of things. So that's interesting. Again, that will go with starting working on it early, contact different institution, say, hey, I want to apply for a NERC grant. What do you do? Do you help me? Do you give me some bonuses, etc.? And that's, I think, the most important one that I learned through these years is check actually for the people at the university that kind of offer nice support for the writing. Basically, I find it very hard because you're alone writing this grant. But if you have nice people that are willing to either review, discuss it, etc., it makes the process much, much easier. So yeah, that's the point on nice support. Then these kind of general tips is what I think is what I've learned from it is keep trying, don't lose hope. For me, I think of it as a lottery. So you just need to do a ticket, get a ticket regularly, and hopefully one day it will work. One interesting thing that I learned also is keep continuing developing the ideas. Even if I didn't got funded, I always tried to squeeze in the ideas that were in the project into the postdocs I had. So chatting with my boss, saying like, oh, I think we could explore this direction, etc. That allows, I think, for the project to grow. So basically, one kind of tip is don't change project for every grant. Keep the same one and add more preliminary data, more papers to support it, etc., etc. And then, yeah, one of the nicest tip I think I found is really value and develop your support network. Like, basically, I find it feels like a lonely task, but it shouldn't. Your support network can help you through the writing, through keep you funding through postdocs, through giving you like just even being enthusiastic about your projects, etc. I think that is the thing that helped me the most. And from that, basically, I also feel at the same time support others, write grants together. So every time I was like writing these grants in tandem with some other colleagues that were at the same level, and then we can criticize each other, etc. I feel it's not a zero-sum game or a competition or something like that because of this kind of lottery element. So I always find it's much easier that everybody, well, at least people that want help each other to get through it, and you get most of it. And I think that kind of leads me to these things of like a lot of people help me support, give me support through these things. Not all of them mention here. I think it's this general idea of sitting on the shoulders of giants. But I kind of prefer the idea of like having just a great support community, because it's not only giants. I mean, don't judge who is a giant or not, but there's also like you can get help from much more junior people as well. Like basically anybody that can give. I took anybody that can give any enthusiasm, any time to chat, or even read just a sentence. That was always super helpful. And that's pretty much it for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thomas. That was really, really informative as well. And also, I think nicely encouraging for those who are here in attendance. So we know that that they're not alone in the grant writing, and that there's plenty of people I'm sure that they can reach out to, right? So that's really important. Oh, Luke is just reconnecting. Oh, yep, Luke, we can see you.
Yeah, I
That
got
was
booted out. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. It's actually perfect timing because Thomas just finished. So perfect timing for the Q&A to start. So thank you all three to our panelists for giving your presentations there. All really different and very useful in different ways. Nydia, I'm going to hand it over to you now to do the Q&A and read out any of the questions that we have there, and we can start from there.
Okay, so we have, well, another question, Jessica. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
So another question just came in, but the first one is more like 3 questions. So I guess we'll start the first part of it and then address the others. So when your first application was refused, or I guess when any application was refused, did you change your project topic very much in the successful application afterwards? So I guess we'll address that one, and then we'll continue how you fix it to make it work, and then the paper count, or a paper still under review counts. Like, would you still count those? So those are the 3 questions. So I guess that's an open question. So whomever wants to start.
Yes,
Yeah, should I go?
Thomas,
Yeah,
yeah, go for it.
yeah, I think definitely for the papers in review, 100%. I feel one strong part of my application was just a preprint I put on bioRxiv that was pretty much already doing what I'd done in the grant. And it's hard to say what is useful. This is why, I mean, it doesn't hurt, definitely, and they take that into account, but then it leads to the first part of the question where I started by really trying to tailor next grant to what the comments were. But then as I mentioned, there is so much randomness that I think it just depends on the panel. So it's hard to say, or if somebody says there is not enough support for this claim, another panel would be like, yeah, there's no problem with this claim. So it's hard to tell.
Sarika or Luke, anybody want to
Yeah.
add anything to that?
I could add. So I put in the NERC IRF, I think it was 2018, and I got reviewers' comments back, and so my application in 2022 was very different to that application. All my objectives were different. They were saying, you know, I need to focus on my strengths. I think I was in the first application, I was going for something that was really ambitious that I didn't have much experience in, and they had spotted that. So then I had a good think and thought, actually, I should just do what I'm really good at and do it for this topic. So I think that really helped in that final round. And I would agree with Thomas that if you have a paper, when you put it on bioRxiv or one of these other preprint servers, you get a DOI number, and I think that's what they are really interested in, that it's in the public domain somewhere. So that's definitely worth, I would say it would definitely count and add that to your CV when you're submitting it. Yeah, I hope that answers that question.
Luke, if you want to, I saw your hand up there.
Yeah.
Oh, wait.
Yeah. So I think I'm like partly frozen, but it's okay. So can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you perfectly fine. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Okay. So yeah, I mean, so I put in pretty much identical applications for DECRA, IRF, and URF in 2021. And I got very similar feedback for all three about, you know, particular bits of the project being vague, or, you know, people thinking that something that I was trying to do was completely impossible. And then I collected preliminary data and did those analyses for all of those things, and then did a very similar application for those three applications again. And then I got the DECRA and I got the IRF, and I got an interview for the URF, and I didn't even get to the interview with the URF. So I think if you can get those reviewer comments on like a first pass at applying for one of these things, you can definitely use them to improve the application. Because my experience was definitely that people said similar things about the same fellowships. So I was able to, you know, really think like what's actually important from these reviewer comments, and, you know, what might actually come out in the wash with the randomness that Thomas is talking about. Because there is definitely some element of randomness, because you might get one reviewer one year who has some particular idea about something that you're going to do, which will radically differ from the opinion of a reviewer that you might get the next year. But if you are putting multiple applications into different schemes and you're getting the same sort of feedback, then I think you can use that to really get an idea of, you know, what's working and what's not working with these applications.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sorry, because I think there was a couple of questions, wasn't there, in that? So I'm trying to, Nydia, sorry, I'm not sure which question it was that we were looking at.
So well, the first one is already answered. So there's another one. Also a few questions in one comment. So who will be in the panels? Is there any way, is there any way in knowing in advance who is going to compose the panels that are going to review your application? Whomever wants to start.
I'll start. So when your application is first submitted and it goes out to reviewers, you won't know who those reviewers are. They used to be, when I first did it, I think I could give 5 names, but when I did it in 2022, that wasn't an option. So they are sending your proposals now, I think, to this NERC college, the people who are in the NERC college, and I think it'll be random. But if you get an interview, a few weeks before the interview date, they tell you what panel you're part of. And I think they give you the names of the people who are sitting in that panel and the chair. So, and I think there's something like maybe 12 names or 15 names, and someone from that group of 15 will be on your interview panel. And I think I had maybe 4 or 5 people in my interview panel. So you do get a list of those names, and actually I didn't know any of them, so it wasn't really helpful. I was Googling them and stalking them, thinking, maybe I know someone, but it didn't really help. But you do find out who those people are. Interview panel for sure.
Okay, thank you. So anyone else want to add anything, or shall I continue to the next question?
I think, yeah. Sorry, Luke wanted to go.
Oh, so I would just say that in terms of writing it, I would not write it as if you're writing for somebody who's a scientist, but not necessarily in your field. So be mindful when you're writing the application that it'll be assessed by people who aren't paleontologists. So there might be some things that you need to explain that you wouldn't necessarily explain in a technical scientific paper, I would say.
Yeah, well, that was the next part of the question. So, well, I guess I'll read it and then we can all, chip in. So, should we write the proposals very serious, like writing a scientific paper, or make it easier to understand and more fun? So, anyone wants to? Luke has already given his opinion. Anyone else?
I think it links to this panel structure. From what I understand now, that like since last year, they don't even send it to review anymore. It's just reviewed through the NERC college or whatever they're called. So in that sense, I think understandable and fun is definitely nicer, but it's a very, I think, dangerous line to thread. It needs to be very serious and very backed up. And I think so from knowing several people afterwards that have been on the panel, not that reviewed me or anything, but they just discuss very quickly. I think they have 3 minutes per grant or something like that. And they just go, yeah, that sounds fair, or no, not valid or something like that. So I think more than writing it as a scientific paper, it should be more written as maybe a nature or science abstract kind of thing, where it goes straight to the point. Maybe, like, yeah, 1 paragraph should tell the whole story very quickly.
I would say it needs to be serious as well. And you need to get your idea across throughout your application. So definitely in that first paragraph, but I would reiterate it in different places in your application form, because reviewers will I don't know, maybe they skim read your application, and if they missed it in one area, if they spot it in another one, then that will flow back in. So it needs to be quite serious, for sure. But I also think it needs to be broad as well. So, try and think of how somebody who isn't a paleontologist will understand and read their application, and if they can, but it still needs to have that depth of knowledge. So it's kind of a fine line. So what I would suggest is making sure lots of different people are reading your application before you submit, and see if you can get those comments from your community. So if you're a paleontologist, send it to a biologist and see if they get what you're trying to do, and maybe they'll spot some things that you wouldn't have otherwise. So definitely getting NERC people, I would say, to review it. So if you're at an institute where somebody has 1 NERC grant, I would ask them to review it so they know what the NERC key strategies are, what NERC are kind of looking for, and then they can read your application and give you a really good like reviewers' comments as well. And so that I think that was really helpful for me.
Thank you. I think that's a very important point, because like we might spend months writing applications, but they will not spend the same time reading them. So make it as easy and clear as possible is a very good advice, I think. So there are no any other questions in the Q&A.
I have some questions in the meantime.
Yes, so I guess
As always.
yeah, I thought you did. So you
I
wanna
can't
start
help but relate.
shooting and then yeah, but if the attendees think of anything else that they want to address, then pop it up in the Q&A and we'll intercalate.
No
our
matter how small the
questions and your
question is.
questions. Yeah.
Please
Yeah.
ask them. Now is the time. They're more than happy to answer your questions. So it's funny when you're talking about grant writing and saying that it was, Sarika, as you said, you're writing it as an expert, but you want it to be as smooth to come across to anybody that can understand it. I cannot help but think about the Olympics right now. You look people playing gymnastics and you think, wow, that looks pretty simple what they do, but it takes years of training for them to be able to do what they do, right? And it's kind of that same element. It wants to look smooth, it wants to look easy and that anyone can do it, but that there's years of experience sort of behind it and a lot of support. So grant writing is exactly the same. It's a marathon, not a race. So there's a reason why the Olympics only comes around every 4 years. One of the questions I always have about this is managing your grant application process writing while you're also doing another job. And that's something that I'm always really interested to hear about, whether or not there are discussions that you have with your kind of whatever your line manager is, your boss, your PI on a certain grant that maybe you're already on, and how you manage writing that grant while also maybe already doing a postdoc. And is that conversations that you have with them to find their support to make sure that you have time to write? Or how have you, decided to manage those times? And that's a question to all three of you. So whoever wants to jump in first.
I can jump in first. So I would say it was mixed for me because I was writing while I had my BBSRC grant, and I did get help from my supervisor, so he would read it and tell me, I think you need the data or give me that kind of input. But then when I went for the final NERC IRF in 2022, I was actually in a teaching job, so I didn't have that input. And so that, I think what I did was I sent my application actually at the end of August to my department who won NERC funding. So I sent it to 3 or 4 people, and I got some really good feedback from two of them. And I think that helped me change it. What they were saying was I really needed to make it more environmental. So previously it had been sort of BBSRC facing, and I thought I had switched it quite a lot to NERC, but they were saying, you need more environmental sampling. You need to kind of have a look more, show more emphasis on the environment side. So I did that and I listened to that. So I think that really helped me. That feedback was more important for me.
Pretty impressive. You were teaching and writing this grant application at the same time, I have to say.
So I would say that because I had started much earlier and had applied for fellowships before, so I knew what my objectives were and what my preliminary data looked like. So it's almost like I had a sort of good foundation of the writing. So it was just tailoring it, and I did have to work in the evenings as well during that time. So I'm sorry if that doesn't help, because I have young children as well. So I know I was putting them to sleep and then reading sections and reading them almost every night, doing another section or another paragraph and trying to finesse that application. And I didn't have enough time in the day because I was teaching, or even in the postdoc time. I think there's a lot of time. It was kind of really critical for me. This was my one chance to get a path to independence. So I chose to work in the evenings on that application as much as I could.
Yeah, a lot of sacrifice, but definitely paid off, I hope.
Yeah.
Thomas or Luke, do you want to weigh in on that? How did you manage the grant writing in general or with this specific fellowship?
Yeah, in general, I'm more of the philosophy that's like it's part of a normal research job as a postdoc. So I always feel it should be expected by the PI that you spend time writing grants. But also I don't think it doesn't take away from, I feel it doesn't take that much time away from teaching or research, because effectively you're doing either very good preliminary research in the grant by developing the ideas, the way you write the ideas, that's always good for teaching, like as in like it trains you on how to be very precise and very like, yeah, the word is snappy always. So I've never had, I've been very lucky that all my PIs were like, yeah, of course, go for it. But I've always thought that if they're not, I can convince them that this is not time just done for me. This is also time for developing or testing ideas, or even like, because you write it down in such a kind of precise way, that can be like an idea of like, okay, this is kind of a preliminary project we're doing, but it's not going to work because now that I've written it down, I think we're going to miss this big piece of equipment or something like that. So it allows you also to improve on your current research and on your current teaching, I guess.
Luke, I don't know if you're frozen or if you're still with us. I think he might be frozen, is he?
No, I think I'm still here, just about.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think because there are. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go for it.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think it's a great question, because I think, you know, for postdocs, there's a lot of draws on your time, you know, because you might be also finishing up projects that you were doing, you know, in your last postdoc, or trying to write up the final chapters of your PhD and things like that. So I think it's one of those things that you just have to have a conversation with your PI about. And I was really lucky in that when I was writing all of these, I was in a research and teaching job at Oxford, and sort of Roger Benson was in charge of my like teaching responsibilities, but he was also mentoring me through the IRF as well, and we were like developing the research ideas together, and he's very much part of the research project as well. So I think if you have I think if you have good mentoring relationships with your PIs, then hopefully, you know, this won't be a problem, but it might be a conversation that you have to have early, saying, you know, I'm going to be spending time writing this grant because it's, you know, essential for my career. And so if you want to have me as a colleague for the rest of your career, then it's good for you as well. So I think it's, you know, I think everybody benefits from writing these things, and I think PI should see that.
And
Absolutely. Yeah, Nydia, please go ahead.
Yeah, something very quick. So some universities would have would fund writing retreats. So the University of Manchester at least does that, and that's very useful for people that has care responsibilities at home. Like I know I have a 3-year-old daughter, and it's basically impossible, you know, write anything while she's around. And you know, having to wait until your kids go to bed it's sometimes basically impossible because you're very tired from the rest of the day. That's something maybe that people could look into it, because if you could just get maybe 2 days away, that would really help to, you know, get through a good portion of the application. And something else, I'm going to advertise for the Paleontological Association, because we have the career development grant, which I applied for when I was writing the Marie Curie application, and I got it. So they cover for my living expenses, you know, in terms of like food and that, and my daughter's like the school time that I was sending her to, so I could actually have time to write. And I always say I wouldn't have gotten the time to write application without her help. So, you know, just shop around, see if anyone is offering any kind of funding that you could get to help you get by while you're spending very busy months writing your application. That's the only thing I wanted to add. There is another question on the Q&A. Shall I go for that one, or do you want to pop another one in, Orla?
Yeah, no, go for it. You can ask that one away as well. And also, good point, Nydia. I'll put in while you're asking that question the career development grant. Yeah.
Okay. So there's another question in the Q&A, and the question goes: what is the ideal time to apply for and likely get the NERC IRF? as in how many years after the PhD. So whomever wants to start on that one. Thomas, Luke, or Sarka?
Yeah, I can go. It's just my own opinion, but I think several, which is not a very precise number. The idea for this grant is to support you starting your own group. So I think although you can apply straight after your PhD, I think it's going to be harder to demonstrate that you're ready to start your own research group just straight out of your PhD, or even apparently in the guideline, you don't even have to have completed your PhD, which by some people maybe can show this maturity or this idea or whatever, but I think most people is 5 to 10 years after PhD, something like that.
I would say, for me, it was a lot longer. And when I applied for it the first time and didn't get it, it wasn't that I hadn't I'd just finished my PhD or anything. It was more about the project that wasn't quite ready, or that I didn't have a paper that backed it up, or publication that didn't back up what I was saying I could do. So it was more about you as a candidate who can carry out that project. So you need to show, those aspects of that project. And I think that takes maybe a few years after your PhD. And I think one of the bits of advice that they give us here at Exeter is if you're looking for a fellowship straight out of your PhD, there are really some fellowships that are you have to apply within 5 years of your fellowship, and they're usually really short. They might be 2 or 3 years, and the NERC one is longer, so it's 5 years. And so the longer the fellowship, I think the longer maybe your postdoc or your CV needs to be more colourful. So that would be what I would say, but it doesn't rule you out. And now they've lifted the cap, so you could be a postdoc for quite some years and apply, and apparently there's no cap. So yeah, you go for it.
Luke, are you with us?
I am, yeah, but I've got nothing to add on that.
Okay, that's fine. Just
Yeah.
checking. I'm just checking that you are there and that you, in case you wanted to contribute, that was all.
So there are no other questions at the moment. So if you have anything else to ask, Orla, I say go for it. You're mute. You're mute.
Sorry, thank you. We slightly touched on it. A couple of people slightly touched on it, but I found it personally a little difficult to. Maybe it's because I didn't do so much detailed research on the website, and maybe it was just difficult to find. But about the actual support and the role of the host organization, and any kind of, has anyone here had any experience with internal deadlines from their host organization for applying to these, and how important are they? Because I know with other fellowships, that's been really important to also know the internal deadlines for these things, and whether the host organization, of course, how quickly you need to approach them about that. Sarika, I can see you nodding away. So
I know we have an internal deadline, and for this round now, that hasn't even been announced, that they've already done that sift. So they've asked potential candidates to give a 1-page summary of what they're planning along with their CV, and people have and there's a small mini NERC review panel here, so they give feedback really early on. So yeah, so I had to go through that internal round as well, but I don't think it stops you. And if you're moving institute, so if you're applying to do your NERC IRF at another institute, you need to go and flag that up really early, or even in a different department in the same institute, flag it up early so you don't miss those deadlines. But I think I know ours is flexible, so I think if we had a candidate come forward and say now, they want to do the IRF at Exeter and they've missed that internal funding, that NERC network would go, okay, well, let's have a look at their 1-page application and give them some feedback so that it's not a hardcore no just because you missed that deadline.
So it's probably good to know. So for example, in Exeter, they've already had for this round that's coming up, they've already had the internal deadline, but that
Yeah.
doesn't mean you shouldn't just email whoever's in charge and send them
Well,
your
no.
kind of.
So what we've done is for every application, this one pager and the CV, we've looked at it and said, actually your project sounds great and your CV is really good. This is a good.
Okay.
Or we've done the other opposite and say, I think you need to wait a little bit more, get some more data and publish or give that advice. So because if you apply too early, and you get those same comments back from your reviewers, you'll be kicking yourself because you won't be able to apply with the same application. You have to change it almost 60%. And you know, these ideas that you have, you know, they don't always come up so quickly. So make sure it's the best time for you to apply as well. Yeah, don't ruin your chances. I just
Yeah. In a way, it's kind of good because it kind of allows to catch any kind of major issues or flaws that you can't see yet in what you're planning to put forward as your proposal. Sorry, Nydia, you wanted to add something there?
Yeah, one thing, internal SIVs sometimes are dependent on the department. So even if you contact the university and the university says, oh, there is none, but the department you might be wanting to go might have one. So it's a good idea to directly contact the department as well.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I know some universities that do that in the UK where it's actually by department. It's not just by the university having their own internal deadlines. So that's a very good point. I don't see any other questions in the chat at the moment. Thomas or Luke, did you want to add to that as well? I don't think either of you had internal deadlines, did you?
Oh, I did, yeah, in Sheffield, but I think it's
Similar.
exactly the same as Sarika said, but it's very university dependent. So yeah,
Yeah.
I would say contact anybody in the department you want to work with, and they can redirect you.
Okay.
So one other internal deadline that hasn't been mentioned is that often the university will ask you to submit the application a week early, and they'll want a finalized version of the application a week before the actual external deadline. So also be mindful of that, and know when that day is, because that could also trip you up and cause some problems as you get close to that deadline as well.
That's a very good point. They generally want to be able to send it in, don't they? Those at least kind of 5 to 7 days early, so they know that there's absolutely no hiccups with actually putting it through the system, the NERC system.
Yeah,
so,
and they want to check the budget and things like that as well. So yeah, all of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, that was my second question that I had when I was thinking there was about your budgets and what exactly, I'm not sure in the application how much detail you have to give, and did any of you feel limited by the fact that there is a bit of a cap on equipment, it seems? I mean, £10,000 is by no means small, but I know even with my own research, it would feel small with the kind of equipment that I use. So,
yeah, so for me, I budgeted to buy a microscope, and you cannot get very much microscope for £10,000. But I have managed to find some other funding to sort of supplement that to get what I wanted. So it can definitely be a limiting factor, and that's one of the reasons why it's important to find out what your host institution actually has, because if you have some piece of equipment that's going to cost £100,000 or £1 million, but your institution already has it, then you just need to budget to use it and not to consideration when choosing where to go.
I think we caught most of that, Luke. It sort of delayed a little bit on it. So maybe if you just want to slightly repeat what you said.
Oh, I was just saying, so so the £10,000 cap was a problem for me because I wanted to buy a microscope, and you can't get a great microscope for £10,000. So that was something that I did need to supplement with other funds. But I would say this is an important reason to choose your host institution carefully, because if you do need some expensive piece of equipment that you can't fund from the IRF, then it's important to know that that equipment is available either through an external collaborator. So that goes back to getting, like, letters of support from external collaborators, or from, from within the university. Because you can't buy, an SEM with a NERC IRF come through a bit better.
Yes, I think I actually caught what you said there. I think you said right at the end the example of you can't just buy an SEM, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And using your collaborators to be able to maybe use other machines in other areas, right? That's what you said, I think, wasn't it? Okay,
Something like
we definitely caught it.
Okay.
Thomas, did you have any kind of qualms with any of your budgets, or it was quite easy to follow?
Yeah, I mean, I'm entirely computer based, so I budgeted a laptop, but I actually don't even need one. So for me, it was very easy.
Thomas, you might need one. You never know.
Yeah, I keep the money. I will use it at some point, but yeah.
So I was just checking on the internet. So I think the £10,000 cap is for one piece of equipment. So you can get 2 or 3 small pieces of equipment, and it can be over 10,000. So
Okay.
one piece of equipment that you can't have over 10,000. So I think in my budget I had like a fridge, a freezer, to store my samples in, and I've got another piece of equipment, but all of them were small, like 5,000 for this stomach that churns my samples. So they were all, I think they went over 10,000, not by very much, but yeah, so it's individually it has to be below 10,000, so one piece of equipment can't be more. And I think that might be to do with showing what support your host institute. You have to show that this is a really good place for you to do that piece of work. So, does it have those facilities that are going to support your work? So, if you don't need to buy that microscope in one department, that's really good. It shows that you're getting that host institution support.
That's true. And if there's like a fault, as you were saying, for, work packages and that as well, you kind of have to show if something does go wrong, what are you going to do? And in a lot of ways, that's when you fall back on your host institution. So are those lab facilities already there? Is there other fridges or freezers to be used elsewhere if something goes wrong? There's a few of us here who also conduct experiments, and the costs just stack up so quickly if the labs aren't there to begin with, and the framework in which you can conduct your research, right? So that's where it's really important to make sure, as you were saying as well, like, things like an SEM are definitely not going to be bought on £10,000, so it's important to make sure you're going somewhere that you're supported by people, but also by the equipment or the lab space or whatever it is you need that is there. And following on from that as well, that advice is, when it came to reaching out to collaborators for the actual grant application, I'm not really sure how it works for NERC in terms of how many collaborators you can have, if there's a certain amount that you're allowed on the grant, and how did you decide in terms of maybe there's 1 or 2 people in your host institute, right? But outside of that, did you bring on a lot of other people from elsewhere? Or did you kind of keep it quite small and sort of compact within the host organization?
For me, I would say I have a lot of international collaborations, and actually that was the comments that I got from the NERC people who reviewed my application within my department. So at that point, I only had 3 collaborators, or 3 sampling points. I would say that one was in the UK, one was in Bangladesh, and one was in New Zealand. And they were saying to me, I don't think that's enough, for you to call this an international project. And so I went away and actually got several more from different places. And I got letters of support from each of them. And so that, I think, boosted my application substantially, I would say. It looked like there were people around the world who were buying into my project and believed that I could do what I'm saying. So I think that made it so much more credible.
point, kind of getting all these other experts around the world that are maybe parallel to you or whatever, kind of coming together and saying, yes, we believe in this research and this researcher. It's a very good point. Luke and Thomas, did you kind of do something similar as well to make sure that your collaborative network was broad?
Yeah, very similar and very international as well.
So I did similar, but I got the opposite advice, where it was like, oh, lots of collaborators around. And in early reviews, they were like, drop them all. It feels forced. Like, I love working with a lot of people around the world. But basically it's most like the people commented that saying like, it feels stretched. I think you don't need them. It's just your mates around or whatever of people you want to work with. That's not strengthening the application. So maybe that's something to have in mind. Whereas I feel like for the whole process is be very sure that you can justify the things. So if I say, oh, I want collaborators around and my project is simulation based, where again, I just need a laptop, maybe I actually don't need these collaborators, although I'm going to work with them, but yeah.
Interesting. I haven't heard that one before, but I guess again it comes down to the randomness of the reviewers as well, of what they want. So, but as you said, you need a laptop to do your work, but it's still at the end of the day, it's a collaborative project. And if it's a much bigger project that's going to last the duration of 5 years, I can see why you want the broader network, right? So I will disagree with that reviewer. So touching on the broad collaborations, we also briefly mentioned about incorporation of EDI into your projects, and I'm wondering what aspects and how important is that within the NERC structure to make sure to incorporate that into the project, and in what capacity?
Oh, I'll go.
Srinka, yeah, go for it.
So the way I answered it, I got asked in my interview as well. I can't remember the exact question, but it was about maybe something along the lines how had I thought about EDI within my proposal. And so one of the things that I'm doing is collecting samples. I'm getting people across the world to collect me samples of water and shellfish and send them to me so I can look for these dormant cells. And so I've got some European collaborators, but I've also got collaborators who are in that global south, I would say in the global south. So in New Zealand and in Peru and in Thailand, and Bangladesh. So I would say that what I was saying is that it would be really important to make sure that they get their voice heard, or that they are part of how I'm going to handle those samples and collect them. So for New Zealand, they're really strict on giving bits of the land away. So knowing that information actually is really important. And if you can sort of know those points when you're giving the answers, it knows that you've really thought about EDI and your project as a whole. So that was one of my answers that I gave, and I think that's really important. So one of the things in climate science is that most of the references in the latest IPC report were from the Northern Hemisphere, even though the Global South were doing lots of research and a publishing paper and the impacts of climate change on them. So it's really important that they get recognized and you don't kind of leave them out. You don't just collect their samples and then say, see you later. So, I think you need to show that you're being really respectful to all of your collaborators or whoever is helping you out to do this project.
Very good point. I know in paleontology, there's a lot of discussions around this at the moment and ongoing as well, especially with the kind of material that we collect mostly from the global south, and conversations around helicopter science, as we call it as well. You go in somewhere, you're taking wonderful paleontological material away, but nobody in those countries are benefiting, right? So it's really important to make sure that we're doing our research ethically going forward and we're thinking about those things. So my question goes out to Luke and Thomas as the paleo people here. how you incorporated that into your project?
So I think like research is one aspect of this, but I think there's also sort of broader societal, benefits, and also bringing in underrepresented groups into whether or not it's paleontology or whatever. But I think this is where your host institution can actually help you with these sorts of issues, because there are a lot of initiatives going on in UK universities that you can get involved in, which will really strengthen your case as somebody who's championing EDI issues. So when I was asked this question, I'd already been involved in a summer school that was targeting students from underrepresented backgrounds from within the UK. And that was actually really great. It was something that was, really fantastic to be involved with, especially considering that some of the sixth form students actually came and joined the course like the following year. So that was like a great thing to see. And we also have like a summer internship at the museum in Oxford that's for students from underrepresented backgrounds as well. So I think that, get to know what your institutions are doing to help in the wider community as well as in your own research. I think that can really help strengthen your own commitment to sort of broadening participation, particularly in paleo. Yeah.
That's a very good point. If you don't know where to start, just ask the institute that you're in. If you're someone who wants to help and you just don't know how to start actually involving yourself in EDI in any capacity, it's really important to reach out. I'm sure, like most places, the institutions will be more than happy for you to start volunteering your time or doing something, making yourself aware of the research that you're doing and making sure that you can reach more people with it and be more collaborative in a better way. So Thomas, I can see your head shaking. Is there anything that you want to add to that as well?
Yeah, I found that that bit quite hard to figure out what they wanted in the panel to demonstrate. It's also recent questions that they've added. And so I actually I have a friend that's a EDI consultant for businesses. So I was asking her, what are the kind of things, I can demonstrate or I can add there to or to correctly answer the questions, as in like in a good way. And so I had very good chats with her. I learned a lot. Also a lot of things that, like, for example, Luke mentioned what the university is doing, etc., etc. But I have a feeling during the interview that basically the people that asked the question, they didn't have any EDI brief, as in they in the sense that they didn't know what to answer and what would demonstrate support to minorized people and everything. So it was kind of awkward because I was like trying to say, I'm very for being a good ally and everything, and they were very interested in my open access aspects of my work, which I thought had nothing to do with it. So it was, I think, from all the questions at the interview, I was trying to kind of guess what answer they wanted to hear, and that one was the hardest because I think how to say it in a non-rude way, I think some people in the panel, let's say, had few training on what EDI can be, etc. So it was, let's say, interesting to kind of second guess what they wanted as an answer. Don't know if that's very clear, but
no, that's very useful. And again, it's interesting now that you sort of reached out to somebody as well to kind of figure out, well, what aspects are you doing that would be considered EDI as well. So some people just don't even know, and they're already sort of involved in those endeavors already. But the most important place to start is to make yourself aware that this is very important, not just for NERC, but in general for your career development, to be part of that. Sarika, yeah, I can see your hand up there.
So I would also add, I think Luke said this before, that they're looking at whether you're looking at your citizenship record. And
yes,
when you're interviewing, you're doing your presentation, they want to look at how good the project is, and they want to have a look at you as a candidate and that host institution. So when it comes to you describing your you as a candidate, if you can show actually you've done some outreach work or you've worked on EDI, I would definitely put it in. And I did that in my talk. I even put down that I was a parent and I had 2 children. So that went into my talk because I feel like that says something about me in my department, that I'm making it really clear that I'm working part-time and I'm a parent. So I made that clear. So I remember when they asked me the EDI question, they started off with, well, you've already covered this in your talk, but we're going to ask you a question about EDI. So I felt like they had to ask that EDI question. And so I didn't repeat all about my outreach because I'd already done that in my talk. So I had to come up with something different, which is why I went with my samples are coming from the Global South. So remember that in mind. I think they need to ask those EDI questions to show, what kind of individual you are going to be in the department in your institute.
Okay, yeah, that's a really good point. So from what I gather, your presentation, you already had a lot of this stuff there. So in a way, that was sort of the last piece of information maybe they were looking for is incorporated in the research itself, it seems, as well as, and it's really hard to know.
Wanted me to repeat what I had said. I think they needed to ask that question, but I didn't repeat what I had on my slide. I came up with something different. And I would say definitely to any of the early career researchers, if they're listening, to get involved in those initiatives in the EDI committees in the department or outreach work, because all of that counts.
It really does. And as I said earlier as well, I know from looking at a couple of these fellowships as well, a lot more fellowships are starting to incorporate this into their fellowships. So it's important that you're aware of it. And the best place to start is sometimes, as was it Thomas or Luke, just going to the organization, your institute already. They guarantee they have things already in place that you can start involving yourself with and making yourself aware. I'm talking lots and lots about this, and we have our diversity officer here, Nydia. Nydia, is there anything that you want to add to that we could maybe highlight? I'm not sure.
No, I think those are all very good points. Asking people around the institution if there is anything you can do to get involved. Some departments have EDI groups as well that they normally hold monthly meetings, and they cover whatever issues it might be current on the department or university. Like, getting involved with those things is always going to look, but it's good for you, and it's always going to look on your CV when you make any kind of application for a job or for a fellowship.
Absolutely, yeah. So unless there's any other questions in the chat, if anyone wants to put anything in now, I will leave it there because I've kept the panelists, I think, long enough in this talk.
I have one very quick question, if that's okay.
Please go for it.
Yeah, so Luke was talking about basically using the same project to apply for more than one fellowship, which I think is it's a very good way of doing it, because if you have a good idea, then why would you change it? But like, my question is, how difficult was it to tailor your idea, your project, to each of the specific fellowships?
Okay, yeah. I would say the budget is like the big thing, which varies quite massively between these different fellowship schemes and what you can and can't buy with that budget. So for one of the I think I was able to budget for PhD students and postdocs and not on the others. So I would say that that's the biggest challenge, because having that extra headroom to get staff and things like that just changes radically what you can do. But I think otherwise, like the preliminary data figures and like the rationale for why the research is interesting, I think can be used very easily across multiple applications.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I have one last question to ask all of you, and that is essentially, what would be the one main piece of advice that you would like to give your past self and also the people that are still here in applying to this particular fellowship, or just fellowships in general, since a lot of you have a lot of experience applying to more than just one? Is there anything that you would kind of like to say overall is the most important sort of pusher for people who are maybe on the fence about applying?
I'll go first. I'll take the easy one. I would say definitely start early, writing your application or thinking about what your objectives are and what your preliminary data looks like. And if you're going for the NERC IRF, get NERC people in your department or in your host institution to look at your application really early on, and for any other fellowship. So if you're going for a Royal Society URF, get the people who have got funding from Royal Society to have a look at those applications. So that would be my piece of advice.
That is an excellent piece of advice, and something that I will also be taking on board. Thank you. Luke or Thomas, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, exactly the same. Start early. Don't do it alone. It's also the thing, like, ask people to help. Some people don't have time, but they can still, you know, chat, read a sentence or whatever. There's many ways people can help. And one kind of pro tip I learned from very good mentor Natalie Cooper is schedule some holidays or something fun to do when you get the rejection or the acceptance, like when you know roughly when you're gonna hear about the grant, like schedule something then so that it's not taking your life away or whatever through depression or whatever. So
very good idea. Be in the sun when you get your email.
Exactly. It's usually in February though, but
yeah, oh, true, yeah. Be doing something fun, so either way you're going to have, you know, an enjoyable time, hopefully, even with the rejection. Luke, anything else you want to add?
Oh, I think the holiday advice is great. So I was actually on holiday in Greece when I got my NERC IRF, and it was awesome. But it was at the very end of the holiday. I would have preferred the start of the holiday, but you know, such is life. I would say budget is the thing I struggled the most with, and I would say, right, don't leave that to the last minute if it were the first time you do it, because it's confusing and strange, and like what actually gets paid for by whom is not entirely clear. So do that stuff early.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. You know, all of us here are scientists. We're not normally used to looking at numbers and in that way and budgets and everything. So that's a solid piece of advice. Make sure to start your budgets early and reach out to people if you just don't know where to start with those things as well. I think you can't expect to be an expert at something when you've never done it before. That's always a, you know, important place to start, is with other people asking. So thank you to all three of our panelists. Nydia, thank you so much for being my co-host. A special thanks to Sarika for coming to our Paintological Association webinar. It's really always nice to hear from people outside as well about their experiences. And thank you to my fellow paleontologists as well. I really, really appreciate it. We do have one more webinar in this summer series that will hopefully be either in August or September. We're kind of honed in on a couple of dates now, and that will be on the Humboldt Research Fellowship, which is based in Germany. So that's another really good one to look at. Germany is a massive country with plenty of research. I have to plug the country that I live in, so definitely have a look at that. And we have three amazing panelists that are waiting to give their talks as well. So we already have the panelists lined up. If you are looking for more advice and you feel like right now you don't have someone around you that can help with kind of guiding you through the process of doing these grant applications, we do have the PALAS mentorship scheme. So if you're not a member of PALAS, you can obviously sign up to be a member. It's about 20 quid, I think it is, to sign up and be a member. You can sign up to have a mentor, and they could actually guide you through that process. So I would strongly advise to do that if you don't have somebody already to reach out to. That would be a good starting point. And I will leave it there. Thank you so much again to everybody, and we'll see you hopefully in the next couple of weeks. So take care, everybody. Bye.